Um,
There we go.
all right, let me hit the continue here. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this meeting. As some of you already know, I'm the new elected IADSD president, taking over for Shahriar Afshar, who's done an amazing job, and I want to thank him again for setting us up for great success for another 12 months. And I understand he's also working on his presidential library, so I can't wait to go visit, and you all should too, and request frequent updates.
Sure.
On a second note, I want to take a moment to express my solidarity with the people in Palestine, as well as the civilian population in Israel, for what they've been going through for the last month and really beyond. But more importantly, I want to also voice my criticism of our own government for never placing any condition behind aid, especially military aid. And to that end, I would like to put something on the chat line for you to consider. And that is consider calling your member of Congress to support HR 2590, which is probably the most common sense piece of legislation I've ever seen, which is basically saying, you know, if we're going to give money to a country, it should not be committing war crimes or atrocities. So it currently has, I believe, 20, 25, or maybe even 30 co-sponsors. Not a single co-sponsor from the San Diego delegation. So I think anyone on this call who presumably lives in San Diego County is fair game to call their members of Congress. And I encourage you to do that and read it over. It's very, very simple. And encourage your member of Congress to sign on as well. So we have a great program for you today. Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez will be here, and we'll give her a nice introduction when she joins. But before we do that, we do have item number 2 on the agenda, which is something we talked about last week. Julie did a great presentation on it, so we'll ask her to maybe give maybe Julie and Shahriar to use that 10 minutes the way you would like. And we will probably take the vote at the end, meaning after Lorena Gonzalez's speech. So let me go ahead and turn it over to you, Shahriar.
Thanks, Maz. Actually, Julie and her partner in crime, Marisol Rubio, is also on the line. Marisol is in Northern California, but working closely with Julie on these 2 resolutions, one of which was just, I think, adopted by the Resolutions Committee of the California Democratic Party. Thanks to no small part to Mori Rahimi's nephew. Nima Rahimi just happens to be on the Resolutions Committee, really helped out that we're related to some folks. And Nima kind of sat down with Marisol and Julie and explained the process and really opened kind of the gates as to how this process works so they can take full advantage and make sure their issue was heard. So I'll turn it over to Julie and Marisol to explain in short what they have done in the past few weeks since the first time they came here, so we can move forward with adopting and supporting their resolutions afterwards. Julie, back to you.
Thank you, Shahriar. Well, thank you for having us here this evening and for putting our 2 resolutions on the agenda. Again, my name's Julie Payne-Neward, and Marisol Rubio, again, is in Northern California. I'm down here in San Marcos, and we have prepared 2 resolutions. And as Shahriar shared, one of them was endorsed by the California Democratic Party at their convention. We are absolutely thrilled around that. We also have another resolution around caregiving. It is going to be moving forward as well. There's a process with that Marisol can share, but we will be moving forward with that as well. So I'll talk briefly about the transparency resolution and share with you what really it's about. And I'll share the larger issue, and then I'll turn it over to Marisol to talk about the caregiving resolution. So again, the transparency resolution is around the transparency of civil settlements involving government dollars that are being used to settle civil claims regarding people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. This woman here next to me is my sister, Natalie. Natalie is a victim of sexual assault at an outside caretaking facility. And I have to say it like that because there was a civil settlement involved. And why do I bring this to you today? People with intellectual and developmental disabilities have the highest sexual assault rate of any group. It is 7 times that of the general public. And for women with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it is 12 times. Some quick figures, there's about 330,000 people in the regional center system, which is the system, the government system that administers taxpayer dollars that goes to vendors and services and supports for people with disabilities. 330,000 people are in that system. There are over 700,000 people to be said in the state of California that have intellectual and developmental disabilities. This crime does not only affect the whole family, the person with disabilities, but it affects the whole family. And we're looking at over 1.5 million people who are affected by this. Why? Again, the rate is over 90% of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities will be sexually assaulted during their lifetime, and it's multiple times. And per NPR, their recent series called Abused and Betrayed, it is during daylight hours by somebody they know. Unfortunately, it is very hard to prosecute these crimes, and the perpetrators are allowed to work from place to place to place and never be caught. It is astonishing. Some of you may have heard about the young woman in Arizona who was in what I will say simply, a vegetative state who ended up suddenly becoming pregnant. That happens quite often. I have quite the network right now through my advocacy, and the comments that I keep hearing is it's about time. It's about time. Shariar, is there anything else that you would like me to add based upon our conversation?
So this is the resolution that was adopted by the California Democratic Party Resolutions Committee, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that's part of the California Democratic Party's platform.
Correct.
As far as I understand, right. And Marisol, your resolution about the caregivers and making sure they have quality compensation and working conditions is continued. It's a continued discussion, right?
Well, actually, it is. I've already spoken to them. What happened is that they swapped the titles and called both of our resolutions a secret settlement. But they were planning with mine, it's going to be reaffirmed essentially, which means that there was something similar already put forward and they approved it. Reaffirming it means they're going to stand behind it and they're going to support it as well. What it is, my resolution is really targeting about caring for the caregiver essentially, which is truly essential. Julie and I have talked about this quite a bit, how it's so essential to really look at, disabilities from a family unit perspective, because it is truly the family that is a foundation of the quality of care that the recipient is going to get. So when we care for the family, the recipient is going to be better off. So my resolution really points out, as you've probably read all those statistics, some years of research I've done, which really paints a very grim picture of the health statistics of caregivers. And the fact that they are literally, this is not just people complaining, but they are literally physiologically aging and dying at a faster rate than the average Jane and Joe. Yeah. And so this is a human rights issue. And so, and as you saw, from some of the research I illustrated there, that caregiver burden in turn has had some detrimental effects in terms of negligence in the care of the recipient. And that's the last thing we want to see happen. And so the other component was talking about the fact that 50% of caregivers are age 55 and over. And when they're getting only paid, no more than $15 an hour, many of them are relying on public insurance such as Medi-Cal. And unfortunately, Medi-Cal has a stipulation that if you're age 55 or older, the government can essentially implement the Medi-Cal estate recovery program, which is essentially going to take all of take their property when they die. And this could be property that they worked for all of their lives. And because they're carrying, usually it's an older parent or a sibling, and they could lose everything they worked for their whole lives. Yeah. Simply because they're doing work that provides $50 billion in economic value just here in California, $470 billion throughout the nation. And yet we're only compensating them no more than $15 an hour. Yeah. So it really begs, this is truly an injustice. Fortunately, Governor Newsom, I believe it was $50 billion, don't quote me on that one, but he's putting investing a large sum of money into home caregivers, which is great. This is exactly what we need. So we're really sort of capturing the zeitgeist, the time to do this work and to bring forward the voices of both the caregivers and the disabled dependents. And I'm just really glad that Julie and I partnered up. I think we've been the yin and the yang of this situation, and very much learning from each other at the same time. And we're very thankful for you giving us this time today to speak with you.
Sure. No, I think I've benefited from knowing you guys just in the past few weeks, months that we've been kind of partnering, and we kind of stumbled on to knowing each other. Julie and I on LinkedIn and the podcast that I was doing on autism. And I think it's very serendipitous that we're here today, about to hear from Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez, who is a champion of labor and, better working conditions for people and living wage, really. So I think this is this is kind of a handing off role for me, so where I'm glad you were here to listen to their presentation, because I would invite them and you all to connect afterwards. And maybe now that the California Democratic Party has adopted essentially both of these resolutions, it is the party's platform, I would kind of ask your office, what now? Who sponsors it? Who can help them navigate the bureaucracy in Sacramento?
Yeah. So I
go ahead.
Thank you everybody. I just added my email to the chat there. Please feel free to email me with ideas. I'd be more than happy to connect you with our legislative director, our scheduler. More than happy to do that. I believe the Assemblywoman is running a few minutes late, so I just sent her a message. If it's okay with you, I'm gonna give her a quick call and see where we're at. And I'm gonna
go ahead.
turn off my camera.
Fine, no problem.
Go ahead. Okay, back to you, Mr. President, for some democratic jokes or something, if you want.
That's what we brought you along.
Yeah, I'm no longer president. It's up to the president's role is that.
We've had 18 months of practice. So actually, I just realized that I already made a mistake, which is I was supposed to get our minutes from for our last meeting approved. So let's take a second here to do that.
Okay.
Does anyone want to call a motion?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we would approve the April minutes by consent without objection.
All right. Does anyone second that?
I second that motion.
Great. Do I have to ask for objections? I'm sorry, I'm new to this. Any objections? Jeff, you sure you don't want to object? Just
Not
kidding.
if you want me to, I will, Mr. President, but
All right.
Listen, no.
The minutes have been approved. So that's what should have been order number 1. So the other thing we will do is we will take actually, maybe it's a question really for you, Shahriar, or maybe others. Since the California Democratic Party has already adopted this, is there any further value in IADSD adopting this resolution?
Yes, Mr. President, just for the record, I'd like to move that we, as the Iranian American Democrats of San Diego Democrat Club, should approve, again, by consent without objection, these 2 resolutions. It would be good for our records.
All right. Does anyone second that?
I'll second that.
Excellent. Okay, and for anyone's information, the links are all on the chat line, and hopefully most of you received it via email. So any objections? All right, going once, going twice. And the resolution is now approved by IADSD. Thank you all.
So Maz, once we get the minutes from Mary Lou on today's action, I'll forward it to the Bay Area Iranian American Democrats as well, and obviously recommend the same thing. And it's no secret, Marisol and Julie, we're in conversations. Oh, here comes Lorena right now. In conversations to create kind of a statewide Iranian American Democrats. So this is the direction we're going. But
Okay.
the Assembly member is here, so I'll turn it back to you, Maz.
Excellent. All right. Well, Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez, can you hear us?
I sure can.
Excellent. We're really happy to have you here. You've made it just in time. We just went through some of the club business. So thank you again for joining us. I'll give you a quick little introduction, although I don't think you need it. So Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez was elected in 2013 and has been fighting for California's working and middle class. She has authored historic legislation, including allowing millions of Californians the ability to earn paid sick day, introducing automatic voter registration, fighting against the misclassification employees as independent contractors, protecting immigrant communities, and more. She is a graduate of Stanford University and has a master's degree from Georgetown University and a law degree from UCLA. It would take me too long to go through the full list, so I'd just stick to that little bit. The other couple of things that I wanted to do before turning it over to you is, first of all, I wanted to commend you for your leadership. You bring a lot of passion to the job that you're doing, and you are outspoken about what you're doing, which is, I think, sorely missing in the party. So we really appreciate that. And most importantly, you're a voice for the working class as well as the middle class. So that's always appreciated. I do have a couple of questions that I want to kind of preview, but I'm sure there'll be others, but the first one is about this bill I keep hearing about, 1139, the solar bill. I'll confess, I don't know much about it. In fact, I found it kind of difficult to find what it actually even is. So I would love for your explanation of what it is, not just so much why you're for it, but what it even is. And then the second one is another topic that everyone here will know that's near and dear to my heart, which is healthcare. So I want to thank you for being one of the co-authors of CalCare. And but I guess my question, and you can take it, the beginning or at the end or whenever it makes sense. What is the strategy to get this passed, given that now it's been tabled? We want to understand not just that we have a bill, but what is the plan to get that passed? So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you again and welcome.
Sure, thanks. And it's great to be here with you all. I'll start with the solar bill since there, is suddenly a lot of attention on it. I want to give everybody kind of a background on how we got to where we are, which of course is missing in the discussion. So early on, when we wanted to increase solar, rooftop solar, we highly incentivized it, as we should have. That was the only way we could do it at the time. The cost for installation was very high. The return was not going to ever get people back to where they'd be equal for their investment. And we needed that investment. It was one of the strategies to get it carbon neutrality. And so it's an important piece of that. This was, in the 90s, quite a while ago. So we did a rate structure in 2000s, early in 2000s, a rate structure that really did subsidize people who were willing to get solar. We had tax credits along with subsidies for what you're putting the grid. Along the way, the CPUC realized those subsidies probably weren't quite right. So they did so that's called net metering. And it's basically what the utilities will pay for what you're putting into the grid. They redid that with NEM 2. That was probably about 2015. Before that went into place, though, in 2013, the legislature realized in some of the reports coming out that the subsidies, the way that they were structured, really was a problem, because what was happening is solar was being placed on middle and really upper middle class and upper class folks who owned their house and could afford it, the upfront cost, even though they were getting subsidized. And the shift from what they were paying was being put on every other ratepayer. As we continue to build solar, that shift becomes more. So for example, in San Diego, if you're an SDG&E customer, if you don't have solar, and don't forget, most renters in my district, of course, about half renters can't get solar. They have no option to. You're paying about $220 a year to subsidize people who got solar. So, I have solar in my house. I'm a big believer in rooftop solar, but I also know that it's kind of unfair if I have a negative bill and my constituents and my neighbors are actually getting burdened to pay my fair share of the grid cost and to pay for the energy that I get to sell back at a retail rate to SDG&E, even though they normally would buy it at a wholesale rate by other renewable energy sources. So in 2013, the legislature told the CPUC, hey, you got to work this out. This isn't working, because as more people get solar, that burden is only going to increase. And so what we're paying now in San Diego, what anyone without solar is paying, that $220 a year extra that you're paying to subsidize solar users, is just going to grow. The CPUC has been sitting on that and working its way through it for 8 years. So what my bill does is say, all right, come on, CPUC, you act or we will. You have until February 2022. Now, it's a phase in. If you already got solar and you signed a contract thinking it's going to pay for itself, you still have that 10 years for it to pay for itself. But it says on new customers, we got to figure out a new way. Now, in between that time, we passed a bill. In fact, I was the joint author in the assembly jockey to pass it, and that was to ensure that we're going to 100% renewable. And so some people will say, well, you're killing rooftop solar, which I'm not killing. I will still have it. Every new house built will still have it. People who want it and want to do right by the environment can still have it. But most of our renewables are now coming from a much cheaper source. And that's some of the big renewable farms that we have, whether they're solar or wind, constructed and operated with union labor. They're paying good wages. Our rooftop solar people, for the most part, are not. And it's at a much cheaper rate. And in fact, on most weekends, midday, we're using about 94% renewable energy. And so, we've come to a time in life when we have to review whether rooftop solar, continued growth in rooftop solar, which burdens those people who can never have rooftop solar, is the way to go, or if we look at broader, bigger renewable sources. Now, that being said, we're still going to have rooftop solar. There are still people who want to do it, like me. It'll take me, 6 to 8 years to pay it off, and I'll get a little extra, and I'll still save on my energy bill, because I'll still be producing extra energy that goes back onto the grid. It's all very complicated how it's done, but what we're saying in this bill, and if you look at the analysis of the bill, is working families can't continue to take on the subsidy, and it's only going to grow. So we're talking about billions of dollars that are shifted from solar generators to the cost being borne by ratepayers. So like for me, for example, I don't pay for the grid, even though I rely on the grid at any time the sun's not out, right? I still have to rely on the grid to get my energy when I'm not producing energy. And yet I don't pay for that. Somebody else is paying my burden. And I'm getting paid for solar at a higher rate than it's worth at the time of day that it's being generated. So I know it sounds, at first blush that, and really there's this huge campaign, because solar companies, guess what? They're big business too. In fact, one of the biggest solar companies is owned by Elon Musk. So they put a bunch of money, and unfortunately, I think really gotten into the minds of people that somehow what we're trying to have dirty energy. We're not. We're committed, and in fact have to go to 100% renewable. I just can't continue to support a situation where the working class and poor people in my district are paying for, quite frankly, people in Rancho Santa Fe to have solar rooftops. And if you look, it is a huge difference. The number of people in an area like Rancho Santa Fe that have invested in solar is about 15%. If you look in my district, it's less than 1%. So it's not a comfortable thing to talk about. It's not a comfortable thing to do, but it's a discussion that we have to have. And at the end of the day, if we can get to 100% renewable and we can get to our goals without burdening poor people, I think we have a responsibility to do it. So that's the solar one. I don't know if there's any questions on that. But it's trust me, when IBW came to me to take it, I knew I was getting in a fight. I didn't know that, I'd be somehow deemed, despite my 100% voting record for Sierra Club and League of Conservation Voters, somehow I'm suddenly, out to kill renewable energy. That's absolutely not true. The other you asked about is healthcare. Now, I'm glad you asked about this. We do need a long-term strategy, and we haven't had one. And I think that that's something that we have to, as a community who want single payer, to get together and do. It'd be nice if we could just force it down everybody's throat, because that's the right thing to do. Again, when you're on the right side, it's easy to say, well, just do it. We'll figure it out. But in reality, there's a lot of obstacles, and I would like to see us first apply to the federal government for the waiver we'll need to get there. So we need a waiver for our Medi-Cal funds to be able to spend them in a way that through single payer. That is the first hurdle to getting single payer. Because we're trying to get all the way there, we're not getting the little pieces done along the way that we need to get there where we think we're going. The good news in this year's budget and this year's, I think, legislature is we're going to extend healthcare to undocumented seniors who are over 60 years old. And that's huge. This is a huge thing that, as a Latino caucus member, we've been working on for years now, to keep expanding that pool of the very working poor who actually can access Medi-Cal. We also had a bill go through that allow kids to, if they're purchasing insurance and they have a dependent parent, to put them on. So we're kind of we've tackled some of the youth issues. We're tackling some of the senior issues, but look, we know the overall healthcare system is unsustainable. We know that we have to get to health for all and to single payer. How do we get there is a question. And I think we've got to really have some honest discussions about some non-sexy bills to get there, right? We're not going to get the whole thing in one swoop. So how do we make progress over the next, whether it's hopefully under the Biden administration where we can actually get a waiver. If we had tried to under Trump, there was no way we were going to, but we could. I do think it'd be interesting to proactively ask the federal government if we could get that waiver. That'd be step one, so that we can move on to step two, so we could move on to step three, and really have this discussion in a way that's meaningful and not just pass something that we can't implement.
I'll save my follow-up questions for later because I want to give everybody a chance. But was there any other? I think we had a couple other topics in general. I don't know if you want to speak to them or you want to go straight to questions. There was income inequality, justice inequality, police reform, other topics. I don't know if more you want to step in here, but.
All good ones. And ones, of course, income inequality is the one that I focus the most on. Obviously, I come out of organized labor. I actually believe that so many of our societal ills would be, I don't want to say completely erased, but would make major progress, whether we're talking about healthcare or housing or all the problems that we're seeing, the homeless, if we simply paid people what they were due for a hard day's work. And unfortunately, we still don't do that. I feel like I've carried countless bills now. We've increased the minimum wage. We've done sick days. We're trying to expand sick days. We're going to continue to take on. I've been supportive, of course, of the wealth tax and ensuring that, people pay their fair share. but we have to continue to ensure that jobs are good jobs. Right now, we have a bill to take on Amazon warehouses, which is really important in San Diego. There is a proposal for a warehouse to go in El Cajon, and the largest Amazon warehouse in North America is being built right now in my district, right on the border. So we really need some protections. Not only, you know, Amazon will say, well, we do well. We pay we start at $15 an hour. Our workers, they're doing just fine. But in fact, an Amazon warehouse, we know the injury rates in an Amazon warehouse are 2 times that of any other warehouse because of what they're expected to do so quickly, and 3 times that of any other dangerous job. So we have a bill to deal with some of those issues. I think that's equally important, that we make sure people are safe at work. Along with being paid well, and they need to be paid more. So income inequality is one of those things that really, I think, drives me. And in particular, income inequality, it's problematic on a lot of issues. But if you could at least stem in making sure that big corporations are paying their workers what they deserve and giving them the right to unionize, I think we get pretty far on a lot of other things. So I've spent 8 years working on these issues and will continue to. It's what drives me every day, the result of being raised by a single mom who worked her ass off, quite frankly. You know, a 60-hour week was a luxury. She you know, worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. And, you know, anyone who works that hard should be able to get ahead. They shouldn't be struggling to pay the bills. And so let's start with the most obvious thing we should be able to rally around, although it's increasingly hard to get the companies to decide that that's a good idea. But that's where a lot of my focus has been. So. And of course, we've done a lot on police reform. We're going to continue to do it. I have a bill on the floor of the assembly to take on some of the stuff that we saw, in fact, in La Mesa last year, the rubber bullets issue, police shooting indiscriminately what they say are non-lethal weapons at protesters, things like bean bags and projectiles, spraying tear gas, making sure that they're properly trained in it, that they give adequate warnings, and that they don't aim towards anybody's head. You can't take a non-lethal, supposedly non-lethal weapon and weaponize it in a close to lethal way and suggest that you're doing something not harmful. So we've got some going on that. And then we have, I think this year, it's not my bill, but I really do think we'll get a decertification process for bad police officers. So finally, when we need one. So those are kind of some of the things. I don't know what individually, I feel like people always have specific questions. I'm more than happy to answer any of them.
Well, Mr. President, if I may, I can ask a specific question.
Yes, please.
Okay. Welcome, Assembly Member. My name is Shahryar Afshar. I'm the former president of the club, and we've met once or twice when I was with the port and when you came to the Persian Cultural Center. Thank you so much for all you've done and your participation in these things. Actually, as a special needs parent, what I wanted to just kind of plant a seed in your office is the work of my fellow advocates, Marisol Rubio from Northern California, who's joining us, and Julianne Neward. Both have loved ones that are special needs, and they're working hard to get Marisol's role, and I want to turn it over to her to ask kind of a follow-up question. Marisol's role is to help caregivers get living wage, which is obviously very familiar territory. And Julie wants transparency in some of these care facilities that take care of our loved ones. So the 3 of us are kind of bound together in that way, and we're trying to do whatever we can to help them. And this club has just endorsed a couple of the resolutions that they've adopted, which the California Democratic Resolutions Committee just adopted recently. So with that introduction, I kind of wanted to maybe turn it over to Julie for a quick hello, unless Maz, you want to segue into something. No, okay.
Continue.
Julie, if you want to just say hello and.
Hi, Assemblywoman Gonzalez. My name's Julie. I actually live over here in San Marcos. I moved from Northern California, where Marisol is in Walnut Creek. Shahryar, thank you so much for teeing us up. I really appreciate it. And again, it's an honor for Marisol and I to be here. We do have a resolution that was recently endorsed by the California Democratic Party at the convention. quite simply the personal story. This woman that's next to me is a Me Too survivor with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It's my sister, Natalie. She was being sexually assaulted at her outside caretaking facility. And I have to use those very specific words because there's a secret settlement. The secret settlement, as you know, is paid by the facility. These facilities are funded with taxpayer dollars. So essentially, we as taxpayers are covering up an epidemic of sexual assault amongst one of our, and I have to be very careful, one of our most vulnerable populations. NPR featured my sister's story under She Can't Tell Us What's Wrong because my sister is nonverbal. She has high support needs. She's similar to a 10-month-old baby. That's what her support needs are. Diapers, feeding. She's full-time care. My mother is now a single mother, like Marisol is as well, caring for my sister. And when my sister was raped, we had to take her out of her facility and we kept her home for 4 years straight without any services or supports. And we relied on the system. And we also fell through every crack in the system. The criminal case is still very wide open. The civil settlement quickly happened. They gave us money, told us to be quiet. I'm not a quiet person, okay? I'm not gonna stay quiet. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities are sexually assaulted at a rate 7 times that of the general public. That's the highest rate, and women are 12 times, and it's multiple times. And many of the families that I speak with did sign a non-disclosure agreement. And I know Senator Leyva, she did Bill SB 820, which is an awesome segue, but we need more transparency into the abuse that's being settled by these facilities with taxpayer dollars, because essentially we as taxpayers are covering this up. We need more awareness and we need risk reduction measures. And that's what this resolution and our goal with legislation is all about.
So do you have a current bill or just the resolution?
We have a resolution right now and I can segue to Marisol.
Okay.
Hello, Assemblywoman Gonzalez. ¿Cómo está?
Bien, bien.
Mucho gusto verla. I know we met a long time ago, so it's a pleasure to see you again. Thank you everyone for having us here. Assemblywoman, I've been particularly advocating for, I've been a caregiver for my daughter who's a brain cancer survivor now for 25 years. And in that process have had to deal with just a whole host of institutions, big institutions, education, healthcare, as well as, and doing this, trying to go to college and getting my degree in neurobiology and, just really doing this on my own because my family did not live nearby. So really had to kind of go through the ringer, and it was very challenging. I mean, emotionally, physically, psychologically, every dimension of health was being challenged simultaneously. And for, what I did early in my educational career is start to do research on caregivers and their health status, and found out some really just shocking statistics about our health. I'm not sure if you're familiar with some research that was done at Stanford, your alma mater. They did some really important research on caregivers and actually found out that their cellular aging was at 6 times the rate of single parents. And most of these caregivers, these high stress caregivers like myself, are dying, losing up to 10 years of life in the work that we do. Right. And as you know, up until very recently, I mean, we were getting paid about $13.50 an hour. And they just recently bumped it up to $15 an hour. And many of us are not getting, are finding it very difficult to find full-time status because, as you know, many of the hours aren't counted. Things that we're doing are just not counted. And then fortunately, as you know, the governor, temporarily put a halt on that 7% cut to consumer hours, but we still have to make that permanent. Yeah. And you and I we're both very pro-labor. I'm an SEIU 2015 union member. And, I feel like we really have to take this opportunity right now that the government has put forward a huge grant for caregivers. He's supporting, putting some funding behind that. And in my resolution, I really highlighted a lot of statistics, research that I've done since 2004, talking about the health status, that really illustrates that these aren't just people complaining. This is literally people who are dying in the process of doing work that has enormous economic value, 58 billion just here in California. So, you know, what we'd like to see, we understand that the work that Julie and I do is really sort of the yin and the yang of the situation. I've been the caregiver. Julie has been a caregiver to her sister, but a sibling from that perspective of a sibling. And we are both, you know, we understand that by caring for the caregiver, you're also providing better care for the recipient.
Right.
And that's even also been widely researched. There was a recent research that was done on that, showing that in 2016, 2017, they found that 13 out of 103 deaths among disabled persons were due to treatment delays, neglect, or abuse. And so it is really important, and that we, you know, that we do something about it, because people are dying, both
Right.
from both sides of this issue. And my resolution, I actually co-authored with Julie one resolution that was prioritized, which we're super excited about. The other resolution is going to be reaffirmed in the e-board. There was a little bit of a processing issue, so we have to do it in August. But both of them were well received at this point from the party, and we would love to have an opportunity to discuss further with you those issues and the nuanced talking points about that.
I just feel free to come see me in my office, and we can discuss it. I've been obviously a longtime supporter of UDW. That's what we have in our area, and of the caregivers there. Well versed, obviously, even before I came here, and the actual cost savings that we get as a state if people are willing to stay home and care for their loved ones. It actually costs less, and as Julie pointed out, is less dangerous, obviously, for the individual. I mean, we have some real problems at our long-term care facilities that just, I think, I'm hopeful post-pandemic that it's something we take seriously. I know I've put in a couple bills to deal with some of the abuse issues, but not nearly enough. And I mean, I know there was maybe a Brian Mainshine bill a few years ago, I think. Yeah. The secret settlement issue is huge. We've tried to take it on a variety of things. You know, there are two things that we should always be aware of when people are talking about arbitration outside of union arbitration, but mandatory arbitration and secret settlements. That is how abusers hide. And it's something that we continue to have to fight both at the state level. There's only so much we can do about arbitration because that's a national, we're usually federally preempted, but the secret settlement issue is one that no matter what you're talking about, if a settlement is secret, there's a reason why somebody wants to keep it secret, and it usually is to protect the abuser. And so, you know, anytime a victim wants something secret, we should do that. We should respect that. But if there is a desire to speak out, and there often is, that's how you get change. We should tackle that as well. But as far as our caregivers, our home healthcare workers and caregivers, we have to do more. Bottom line is we have an aging population, and it should be seen as a benefit when a family member is willing to stay home and care for that individual, because it does save the state money and it's the best situation for the individual. We know that. And so it's something that we've got to tackle moving forward with an aging population and with the struggles. You know, sometimes it's a daughter or a sibling. My cousin takes care of her son, has been a home health care worker her whole life as well, her whole professional life, if you will. And that's a big sacrifice, you know. And before we jump, I always say, before we jump to things like, and I'm not suggesting that UBI isn't important or stuff, but paying people to not work, we should pay people for the work they're currently doing. We should allow moms who stay home with their children to be paid a living wage. We should have caretakers be paid a living wage, because it's actually in the long run saving the state money. And we shouldn't be talking until we compensate people for the work they're doing. We shouldn't be talking about some just, you know, paying a little bit and making people go away and not have to worry about them. So I'm all in. Come to my office. We can talk. I'd be more than happy if you're looking for next year for something specific, even looking to author a bill. So
Great. Thank you so much, Assemblywoman. We truly appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. You're doing like the Lord's work. I mean, that's all I can say. It's really, I just, I can't imagine. And so, and I can't imagine making the difficult choice that often, somebody can't take care of somebody and putting them into a long-term care facility is the only thing you can do. And then not having the safety requirements and the transparency that is necessary is just heartbreaking. It is unacceptable. So,
Right,
We
thank you.
definitely need to do it. Thank you.
I know we're running short on time. I think Amira had one more question. Amira, do you still have your hand up? I mean, I know you don't, but maybe you
No,
did.
I'm
We'll
good.
let you-
It was
This
just
might be
about
the
police.
last question since we're running short on time.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass.
Okay, then maybe if there's no other question, I'd like to jump in with my follow-up
okay.
for healthcare. So can you just maybe elaborate a little bit about what we on the ground can or should be doing to make this happen? Because let me just tell you how disheartening this is.
Yeah.
When we see 2 consecutive terms with super majority of Democrats in office, and now we even have, as you said, the former Attorney General of California, Javier Becerra,
Mhm.
who's a lifelong supporter of Medicare for all and willing to do the waivers. Maybe you could just like you to elaborate a little more about what are the next steps as you see it, and what can we, the people on the ground, do to push this thing forward in California? We're doing it federally, but
Right.
that's a separate track. But at the state level, what is it that we can do?
So I don't want to diminish what we need to do federally. Obviously, this would be a lot easier if we could get it nationally, right? Because when you talk about California and the cost burdens, and I even had a long discussion with Ash Kalra, who was carrying the bill this year. Look, I got as chair of appropriations, I can't, the system is set up so I do not push forward a bill that costs $4 billion without understanding where that money, or 40 billion, I'm sorry, without understanding where that money is coming from. We have to have a source. We've got to decide a number of things, how we reach that goal, right? And we all know if we pass it, it's a cost shift, if you will. That money will come up because we're spending so much. But unfortunately, the way we do the process is you've got to identify the funding source beforehand. So I think I really, even if it's, I wish we could just have this year pass something on asking for the waiver, because then that gets a big chunk of it out, right? Then we're talking like, and I don't know I don't have the cost breakout in front of me. So if we could get a bill even this year, or, as soon as possible, to say, okay, we're going to ask federal government for the waiver. I don't know how long that'll take, but we'll get a waiver, and that'll tell us how much more we'll need to tackle in order to get it, because it really is now a process thing, right? It's disheartening because we were talking about it when no one was talking about it, was unrealistic or whatever. It's realistic. So how do we go through a process by which it can actually be achieved? And I want to have that discussion. The problem is we can't have that discussion when the big bill's out there, because everybody just wants the big bill, which I understand. I want it too, but it's like, okay. So we couldn't get that this year. What piece can we take care of so that we're cutting away at the excuses to not have it? That's what I want to see if we can't get it done. I also think, this year became really weird because we didn't want to talk about taxes because we have this huge budget surplus, right? And so no one wants to talk about taxes, but we've got to talk about the structural changes that need to be made long-term. Healthcare expenditures should be paid for in taxes and to fund Medicare for all. And we've got to talk about that. Another piece we've got to deal with, and this is real, this isn't like, I've thought so much about all these little pieces that, hey, let's take them piece by piece. The other piece is doctors and dentists loan repayments, right? We've got a bunch of doctors and dentists with huge loans. Now, I want to leave everybody a student debt, but part of the healthcare for all and Medicare for all has to be like, how do we relieve our doctors and dentists of their long-term loans and ensure that nobody else is graduating from medical school with those that type of debt? It doesn't fit with a Medicare for all kind of structure. So I want to take this as an opportunity to step back and say, what are all these little pieces? And we should probably get together, people who are really interested in working on this, saying how many different pieces are this? And if we can get all the frame there, so we're taking care of everything that somebody throws out there as a reason to not do it, then what do we have left? Do it, you know? And so I think those folks who kind of the corporate medical folks who don't want it, they hide behind all these excuses. So let's start tackling all the excuses one by one so that we can bring it up and say, okay, now what? You know, we've shown you. So I guess that's not as specific. And I to be honest, I wish I'd come, I had a list because I've been thinking about this every time this bill gets introduced. And you know, like I said, I went to Osh and I said, hey, if we're not going to have it, can we turn it into this? Well, nobody wants to feel like they're settling, right? Nobody wants to feel, okay, but let's ask the federal government for that waiver. Let's knock that piece out and we get a waiver. And then, you know, you're cutting a lot of the money, a lot of the costs then out of the bill. That would be great. That's a step forward. What can we do to do a step forward besides just, we have a commission and stuff that in recommendations that are coming, but that's what I'd like to see.
If my information is correct, nationally, we pay about 2/3 of it is already publicly funded. It's just that extra 1/3 that we need to come up with at the national level. And I imagine California is something similar to that.
Probably similar, yeah.
Yeah.
But
All right.
we've got to not give up too. Some of this is like, look, coming out of organized labor, and I know a lot of people probably even on this call have been working on this a long time, but coming out of organized labor, the one thing that I learned is like, you just gotta outlive, hopefully, the opponents. I mean, it's like piece by piece. If you look at young people today, they're demanding these changes. This is a difference, you know, we're seeing change. Change doesn't come as quickly as we'd like, but when the ball starts to roll, then we'll be there and we'll be ready. But it's not giving up and saying, oh, that was that year. We talked about it, you know, I'm done with it now. We cannot be done with it. We have to keep moving forward.
Makes sense. Well, thank you again. I think we're out of time. So I want to thank you once again for taking the time to speak with us. And we'd love to have you here again in the future.
Anytime. So it's Ella in my staff. I see her on here. So she can send you to, she'll send you our information. Everybody wants to come in and talk about policy. Right now is a busy time, but you know, there are times of the year, especially after September, looking for that next year. After September is when we're writing bills. For our office, we know what we're going to do by December. So sometimes people start looking around January, February, too late for us. We know by December kind of what we're doing. So if there are ideas or things you want us to tackle or strategies to sit through and talk about, come to us in that September, October, November time and let's figure it out.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thanks again and enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
All right. Okay, so let me move on to, we've got about 5 minutes. We have a couple more items on the agenda. Let me bring the agenda back. And one of my goals in life is to do things on time. I'm not always successful. So the next item is the public service announcements for any candidates or club members, 1 to 2 minutes each. Do we have any candidates first who want to speak or declare their candidacy? I think we had one last time. All right, I'll take that as a no. And then anyone who wants to make any announcement. Yes, Maureen.
On behalf of Tommy Howe, he called me today. He is a candidate for District 6 council member for the city of San Diego, and he's already declared his candidacy, but he couldn't make it. He just asked me to say hello on his behalf.
All right. Yes. Thank you. And I believe District 6 covers Mira Mesa and Claremont.
Yes.
And other parts of the city. So I think Tommy is a frequent guest here, so thank you very much for that. Does anyone have any other announcements or anything that they wish to do? And then we'll move on to the treasurer's report. And I have one more other closing remark after that. All right, going once, twice. All right, let's go to the treasurer's report. Amire, I know you've been out, so hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot too much, but maybe you can just give us the 30-second version of where we are.
We still have about 1394 in accounts. And we have had some expenses that unforeseen expenses for our banks that I'm fighting them and trying to get credit for them. But there are some issues, so I need to talk about to board about those, what the correct action is. And then we had GoDaddy that we paid for. So in the last few months, that has been the bank has been charging us for what we decided to do on merchant account that we were decided not to do. They're charging us, so we need to challenge that. But right now we got 1394 in account, so we're still doing okay.
Sounds good. Thank you for the update. And for everyone else, just for your information, Amira and I have been working to spring our club into the 20th or 21st century. I think it's more like 21st century.
I think we need to be on 22nd century because we're falling behind on 21st.
So we're gonna have the ability for you to renew your membership online. We have it mostly in place, but there's a little glitch with our PayPal account, which we hope to resolve soon. After that, it will be easier for our new members to join and our renewing members to renew. The other thing that I would like to just preview for our June meeting, actually, Maury, I have two things about the June meeting. I think you had something to say, Maury. Why don't we let you speak to that first?
I just want to say that it seems that the third Tuesday of the month is the best day for us to have the meeting.
But I think you said fourth.
I mean, fourth Tuesday of the month. Yes, the fourth Tuesday.
So I guess I invite everyone in this call to just look at your calendar and see if there's any good reason why the fourth Tuesday of every month might be problematic. Because I think what we want to do is get it into a recurring schedule, just like we've had the last 12 months. I think this month was a bit of an exception for good reason. And we want to stay on a recurring schedule so everyone knows where to find us. So any concern or any comments about that schedule? Please raise your hand if you have any. All right, I'm not hearing any objections. Let's go with that. Let's go with, yes, Amira.
So what was the issue with the third Tuesday? We were not able to get people, speakers?
No, it's the conflict that we have with the Central Committee.
Correct. Okay, sorry. I remember now.
And this month it got canceled, right? So we would have been okay anyway.
No, there are two meetings that I attend. One of them is on a Monday, and the other one is on a Tuesday. The Tuesday one is the one for the Central Committee, and the Monday is the one for the Area West Caucus of the Central Committee.
Okay. Understood. Okay, so we'll go with the fourth Tuesday of every month moving forward. And it won't be every month. We'll probably skip a couple of months, but we'll let you know. And then the other thing about June is I have a potential exciting topic. It won't be a full feature topic, but it will be about money and politics. There's a group in San Diego that's very active in this, and they will make what I think is a very convincing case for some of the problems that we have in our politics, everything from healthcare to military to telecom, to you name it. And that's just the obvious problem, which is we've basically legalized bribery. So she will have I saw her little pitch, I think yesterday, actually. It was very, very compelling. So we'll have her as one of our guests next time, or at least we'll kick it around within the board. So I think that would be an exciting topic that everybody should listen to. And then we can talk amongst the board for any other speakers for our next month, but we don't need to do that now. So I think I'm just about ready to close. If there's any other questions. Yes, Mary Lou.
Who is this person and what's the group's name? for June?
Let me email it to you because I don't
Oh,
have it fresh. I met her for the first time yesterday.
Okay, all right.
Anything else? Any other comments or questions before we adjourn? All right, thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Nice to see you.